there's one of the people that I love to go to on Twitter to get all the great news, and that's you can follow him at Scoop B, Brandon Robinson. Scoop, appreciate you hanging out with us, man. You tweeted out earlier that where KD and Kyrie going to go, you're going to tell the world today. Have you figured out what the next piece of the puzzle looks like?
First of all, before I answer that question, I have to tell you, you guys and your music selection, I love it. Please give the person who picked that tune a raise because they're doing the daggone thing. Secondly, in answer to your question about where they're going, Brooklyn would be a safe bet, and not because many people in your network are the only people that assured it, but if you go back to what I was saying over the 4th of July weekend, running back is still very logical. And that really ties into a lot of different factors. I'd like to use the word informational overload. That was really the case in Brooklyn. Number one, the fact that Kyrie did not get his extension. Number two, there's a lot of just, I guess you could say, confusion since since the trading deadline. And number three, there are teams that are suitors. The Nets don't have to trade Kevin Durant. And from every indication from a myriad of people that I've spoken to, the Lakers wanted Kyrie Irving more than Kyrie Irving actually wanted to go to Los Angeles Lakers. Happy Friday.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but let's go back to when this all went down, because the excuses or the explanations I've heard from people about why this would be that they would end up back there are two. One is simply that Kevin Durant was emotional when everything went down with Kyrie and the statements from Joe Tsai, etc., made a trade request that he later regretted and realized he would rather run it back. Secondly, I've heard instead that he did want to leave, and then when he looked around at the landscape and how difficult it would be for most teams in the league to pull off the kind of deal he's looking for, he sort of tucked his tail between his legs and said, all right, I guess the Nets is the best play for me this year. Where do you see it landing?
The latter, minus the tucking his tail in between the legs. That's a grown man. And what I will say to you is certain teams have fits. Kyrie and KD fit Brooklyn. You look at Philadelphia, Joel. You look at certain teams. Certain players fit certain teams. LeBron and Anthony Davis fit the Lakers. And so when you look at the Nets and you look at Kevin Durant and you look at the landscape, there are teams that could offer things. Personally, I think the best deal that was discussed was the Pelicans. Brandon Ingram and Larry Nance is what the Nets wanted. But I also think that there's some onus on the Nets. The Nets, from an organizational perspective, respectively, I feel like had some issues there that were kind of frustrating to both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, namely their assistant coach, Adam Harrington, no longer part of the fold, a close friend of Kevin's. Also, Eli Carter, a guy that played AAU basketball with Kyrie, that was, from what I understand, did not get the jab. And then once the mandates were rolled back, I'm told that there was some sort of assurance that he would come back. He didn't. And then, of course, Kyrie and his whole situation with not getting an extension on so many levels. And I think that when you look at this, it's a lot of cacophonous noise that I think you would imagine that 4th of July cookouts, barbecues, maybe a little champagne would figure out. But that wasn't the case at first. And then I just think there were a litany of just different people who offered their opinions that just, I feel like there were a lot of people sitting at a resort, sitting poolside at the poolside bar and just enjoying themselves, I'll just say. And I think you gotta kind of sober it up. And that's where we are right now.
So if everybody comes back then, are there any lingering effects in your mind for these players and the team as they try and run it back for a season?
You know, it's interesting you asked that, Jason, because I feel like for the last few years, everybody just believed that it would be the Nets or Philadelphia representing the Eastern Conference, and what you saw in turn was the Bucks and the Celtics representing the Eastern Conference. And if I'm Brooklyn, I take advantage of the fact that people are kind of counting them out. I think that the Nets on paper have the roster and the personnel to make that a reality. Unfortunately, in year one, Kai hurt his shoulder and Kevin was out. In year two, Kevin came back, and then the Nets lost. Harden's hamstring was an issue. Kyrie's ankle was an issue. and they lost to the eventual champion, the Bucks. Last year, Boston's defense was just that good. They built a wall, and they basically surrounded Kai and Kevin, and they were missing a playmaker. James Harden was the playmaker they were missing. And to be honest with you, when I look at Ben Simmons, he doesn't have to put up 30 or 40 points a game. He needs to shoot. He needs to play defense. And he kind of takes a lot of pressure off of Kyrie and Kevin. I feel like, again, those three fit stylistically. To even the talk of, Donovan Mitchell being traded to the Nets, Donovan doesn't fit the Nets if you're looking to move Ben Simmons to do so, because you have three scorers. Even though Kai is a point guard by position, he's still a scorer. And when you saw the times where they did have James with Kai, James Harden made playing so much easier because of his playmaking ability and the dual threat of scoring and commanding a double team. Ben Simmons solves that problem. And I think it's a good experiment to have. But I think also it's differences that I think that both Kevin and Kai have had with Steve Nash that I'm hoping they figure out, as well as the front office and other people as well. And I think that ultimately the Nets should take a page on what not to do from watching the Suns with DeAndre Ayton, specifically because he signed that 4-year, $133 million deal. You don't want a guy disgruntled having to sign an offer sheet elsewhere, and then you were forced to match it, all because you decided not to give him what he asked for in the beginning. I really think that is a cautionary tale, and that's why Kai ultimately opted in, because he gave up $14 million last season. It's not just Kai's contract. It's a combination of just personnel or creative differences. I also think the Nets, specifically with Steve Nash, wants to create more of a system situation. And when you have two-star acts, at times that can be quite difficult to do. So I think Kenny Atkinson exceeded expectations in Brooklyn, and I think the Nets thought that Steve Nash was going to be Steve Kerr in that system, not realizing that it took a little work to be in that position, as the Warriors have done in winning another championship this season. The Nets, they have the chance to do it. Hope they get it done.
It's Spain and Fitz, Sarah Spain, Jason Fitz. We're talking to Scoop B. Robinson about NBA free agency. So if you're convinced that this is going to be a run-it-back situation for the Nets, it does feel like, you mentioned DeAndre Ayton, that sort of ship has sailed, the idea that Kevin might end up with the Suns now that offer sheet has been matched. Are there other teams around the league that are still waiting to see what the decision is? And if that's the case, when do we expect to hear from Kevin and Kyrie that they will be back with the Nets?
I think that is something with Kevin and Kyrie you may start to see in the next month or so. Whether they're appearing somewhere and they take questions, or they do some sort of Instagram Live. Knowing the type of insular people they are, I'm sure that they're going to create their own show, their own post, their own conversation. As far as your question about who I think could be suitors, I mean, I spoke to somebody Sunday, and I've said this on other shows. I know it was Sunday because I was in the bed watching The Simpsons at 8 o'clock. It was like 8:03 when I got a call.
We got a routine.
And
all right.
I spoke to someone on the net side of things. Then I'll give you the edited version. We ain't giving up sugar honey iced tea for KD or Kyrie if it's going to be some BS. And they said to me, that was Sunday, they said, and that's the storyline you're going to see on Monday. It was a little quiet on Monday, and then you kind of saw some of our colleagues giving their expertise and their takes on what's going on, and that seems to be the growing theme, that the Nets aren't just going to take short sales. And I think the Nets realized, in my guesstimation, based off of putting everything together from what I've heard and who I've spoken with, KD is an all-star, but teams have to find a mutually beneficial way to get it done. The Nets wanted Scotty Barnes. The Raptors didn't want to give him up. The Nets want Brandon Ingram. The Pelicans aren't trying to give him up, despite the fact that the Pelicans have about, 6 draft picks between trades with the Bucks and the Lakers. So when I look at this situation, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Ben Simmons last year. Similar but different in that, of course, Ben Simmons hasn't played for, almost 2 years, so to speak. But I think out of sight, out of mind. I think when you see players play, you can revisit those conversations and kind of pick up where you left off at. But I think as for now, I think it's going to be a little quiet. I think people should really enjoy their pools, enjoy their families, and watch sunsets maybe. I don't know. I think it's going to be a little bit quiet for a little while.
And enjoy The Simpsons while you're doing it. Also, enjoy Scoop on Twitter. Follow him at Scoop B. Scoop, appreciate all the great information, my friend. Keep up the good work. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Thank you guys for the opportunity to be myself. I appreciate you.